bosses don't talk, we just sit back and listen. Then make boss moves. She like to argue, so I sent that bitch to law school.
Thank you, Lord.
This time.
Yes, Lord.
Thank you for the life and legacy of Darren and Dana.
Yes, Lord.
Father, we pray continued strength and peace upon everyone assembled,
Yes, Lord.
especially the family.
In Wilson, North Carolina, a quiet residential neighborhood became the scene of a deadly mystery. On March 31st, 2025, police were dispatched to a home on Snowden Drive after receiving a report of unknown trouble. Inside, they found two individuals dead, an adult woman and a teenage boy. The victims were identified as Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren Cox. There were no signs of forced entry. No neighbors reported hearing gunshots or screams. The home appeared undisturbed from the outside. What unfolded behind those walls remains unclear, but a scene inside told investigators that this was not an accident, and that it was not random. 6 days before her death, Dana Jenkins made a public Facebook post celebrating the return of her eldest son from prison. My baby home. My MF baby. Lord, I thank you. The caption, filled with joy and religious gratitude, painted a picture of hope and redemption. But what happened in the hours and days that followed turned that celebration into silence, and would ultimately become the last public sign of peace inside the Jenkins home. The suspect, 25-year-old Daron Jenkins, had been released from prison just 6 days earlier. He was not a stranger to law enforcement, nor to the residents of that neighborhood. His criminal record included firearm theft and burglary, but nothing prior had hinted at the kind of violent investigators were now confronting.
A Wilson man is in jail, accused of killing his mother and his 15-year-old brother. WRL's Carly Haynes is live in Wilson with where this investigation stands. Carly, such a disturbing case.
Absolutely. This is on Snowden Drive where we are right now. We have seen cleaning crews going into the home where Wilson police say this happened. They've been entering with hazmat suits. You can see the green truck right there. And we learned from our reporting that Daron Jenkins, the suspect in this case, had been released from prison less than a week before he's accused of killing his mother and his brother.
The case raised immediate questions. What had happened in the days leading up to March 31st? Why was the crime committed so close to home? What were the underlying tensions, if any, between the victims and the accused? And how did the system miss warning signs? As investigators worked to piece together a timeline, new details surfaced about the victims, about the accused, and about what may have happened during the final hours inside the house. But much remains unknown, and with silence from those closest to the case, the mystery has only deepened. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Dana Vanessa Jenkins was a longtime resident of Wilson, North Carolina, and a known figure in her local community and church. She was a single mother raising her two sons, Daron and Darren, and had lived for many years in a modest home on Snowden Drive. Dana was active at Mount Moriah Community Church, where she regularly attended services and contributed her time to support events and community outreach programs. Professionally, Dana had a stable work history. While specific employment records have not been made public, friends and neighbors confirmed she held various positions over the years, typically in the service or healthcare sectors. She was considered reliable and self-sufficient, the primary caregiver and financial provider in her household. Neighbors described Dana as reserved but approachable, with a consistent routine and a deep dedication to her sons. Her extended family, including her cousin Junilla Cornegay, who lived next door, stated that Dana prioritized her children's well-being. She was said to be especially protective of Darren, her youngest, who still lived at home and was active in school and church. Dana's relationship with her older son, Daron Jenkins, was more complex. According to family members, she had supported him through repeated legal troubles and incarceration. There were attempts to keep him on track during his teenage years, but his behavior reportedly became more difficult over time. Though she never severed ties with him, The relationship appeared strained. Still, Dana allowed Duran to return to her home following his release from prison in late March 2025, a decision that would soon precede tragedy. Darren Cox was the youngest member of the family. At 15 years old, he was a student at Bedingfield High School and was involved in several extracurricular programs. He was particularly active in the media team at Mount Moriah Community Church, where he assisted with sound, live streaming, and visual production during services and events. Academically, Darren was described as a solid student who maintained average to above-average grades. Teachers and peers noted he was respectful, attentive, and well-liked in class. He had an interest in computers and audio technology, which he explored both at school and through his volunteer work at church. Darren's reputation among classmates was generally positive. He was seen as quiet but dependable. He kept a small circle of friends and maintained a consistent school attendance record. He had no reported behavioral issues, no conflicts with peers or faculty, and no known disciplinary history. He lived with his mother, Dana, and at times his older brother, Duran, though that arrangement changed depending on Duran's legal situation. There were no publicly known reports of conflict between Darren and his brother prior to the murder, but those close to the family suggested Darren was uncomfortable during Duran's more volatile periods. Still, there was no official indication of violence in their relationship until a fatal incident occurred. Duran Dante Jenkins was 25 years old at the time of the double homicide. His criminal history began several years earlier and included charges for gun theft and multiple incidents involving vehicle break-ins. He had spent time in North Carolina correctional facilities and had developed a record of property crimes and parole violations. By 2025, Jenkins had served a sentence for firearm-related offenses and was released from incarceration on March 25, 2025, just 6 days before the murders took place. The specific correctional institution from which he was released has not been disclosed, but sources confirm that his release was routine and not under any early release program. It is unknown whether he received mental health evaluations or reintegration counseling before reentering society. While in prison, records indicate that Jenkins was involved in minor disciplinary actions, though none that would classify him as violent. His eligibility for parole had been reviewed previously, but was denied due to concerns about his stability and lack of support plan. Following his release, he returned to live at his mother's residence. There are no indications that any official parole officer or reentry monitor was actively tracking his reintegration. It's unclear if he had employment plans or support programs arranged post-release. Duran's relationship with his mother, Dana Jenkins, had deteriorated over the years, according to relatives. Though she never formally distanced herself from him, relatives say she struggled with his behavior and past legal issues. Despite the tension, she allowed him back into the family home after his March 2025 release. His dynamic with his younger brother, Darren Cox, was less public. Neighbors did not recall seeing the two interact frequently. Family members reported that Darren kept his distance from Duran and that the two had limited communication. No official complaints or domestic violence calls were recorded involving the two prior to the incident. There were no known psychiatric diagnoses, but those close to the family observed troubling signs. Cousin Janilla Cornegay mentioned that Duran sometimes exhibited erratic behavior, paranoia, or emotional withdrawal. These observations were never formally addressed with professionals, and no public record shows any history of treatment or therapy. On March 25, 2025, Duran Jenkins was released from state prison and returned to his mother's home. His arrival in the neighborhood did not initially raise alarm. Residents recognized him and had seen him around before. In the first few days post-release, there were no reported disturbances at the house. Family members and neighbors began noticing subtle signs of unease. According to cousin Janilla Cornegay, she observed Duran outside the home several times in the days following his release. On one occasion, he appeared agitated and had visible cuts on his hand. When asked about them, he offered no explanation and seemed disoriented. She stated he looked like he did something, but she couldn't identify what. No specific arguments were overheard in the days leading up to March 31st. However, Cornegay reported hearing a loud noise from inside the home on the afternoon of March 31st. She did not initially call authorities, assuming it might have been a minor domestic issue. Only later did the severity become clear. On March 31st, 2025, at approximately 5:30 p.m., emergency dispatch in Wilson, North Carolina, received a 911 call categorized as unknown trouble. The caller was a concerned relative, identified later as cousin Juanilla Cornegay, who lived next door to the victims. She had reportedly been unable to reach 50-year-old Dana Jenkins throughout the day and had also not seen 15-year-old Darren Cox, who normally would have returned home from school by mid-afternoon. Cornegay later stated that she felt something was wrong. Her suspicions escalated when she noticed the front door of the house was ajar. Upon attempting to make contact and receiving no response, she made the emergency call. During the 911 call, the operator was informed of a possible welfare concern. The caller stated that 2 residents were unresponsive and there may have been a disturbance inside the home. The caller did not initially report seeing a weapon or visible injuries, but expressed urgency and fear that something violent had occurred. Wilson Police Department officers arrived at the residence on Snowden Drive within minutes of the 911 call. The front entrance was found partially open. Officers announced themselves and entered the home, conducting a quick tactical sweep of the premises. Inside, they discovered the bodies of Dana Jenkins and her son Darren Cox. Both were deceased. Dana was found lying in the living room area, while Darren's body was discovered further into the residence, reportedly in or near his bedroom.
Now to the double murder in Wilson County. We're learning the suspect is charged with killing his own brother and his mother. Police identifying the victims as 50-year-old Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren Cox. Jenkins' 25-year-old son, Darion Jenkins, is now charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The victims were found inside a home yesterday evening on Snowden Drive. Cindy Bay has new reaction from the family.
Loved ones are reeling from the death of a mother and son who police say were found dead inside their Wilson home on Monday.
She was a very sweet person. Always smiled. I can see her smile right now. She always smiled.
Juanilla Carnegie lives next door to her cousin Dana Jenkins, who was allegedly killed by her older son, 25-year-old Darion Jenkins. Jenkins is also accused of killing his 15-year-old brother, a Wilson County school student who is being remembered by Bedingfield High School and Mount Moriah Community Church in Wilson.
They loved each other. They loved us. We loved them, especially Darren. He meant the world to all of us. Our teens here, they're grieving heavily.
According to court documents, Jenkins was released from prison on March 25th on separate charges, just 1 week before the incident. Jenkins is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder as Wilson police investigate the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths.
This is a tragedy, and honestly, there is no winner in this. And I'll be praying for everyone watching this, everyone affected by this and impacted by this.
Cindy Bay, ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
Officers noted no immediate signs of forced entry, and no visible struggle was reported in the main living areas. The home appeared largely undisturbed, which ruled out robbery as a likely motive in the early stages of investigation. Crime scene technicians were called in. During the evidence collection process, they recovered 1 firearm, believed to be the weapon used in the killings, blood evidence throughout parts of the residence, fingerprints and DNA samples taken from several surfaces. No signs of ransacking or missing property. Additionally, law enforcement began canvassing nearby homes for any surveillance camera footage that may have captured activity near the property. At least one neighbor provided home security video showing Darion Jenkins entering the home on the day of the murders and exiting hours later. The bodies were transported to the office of the chief medical examiner in Raleigh, North Carolina. Preliminary autopsy findings were released within several days of the incident. Dana Jenkins died of a gunshot wound to the chest, consistent with close-range discharge. Darren Cox was also killed by a single gunshot wound, reported to be to the upper body region, possibly the head or chest. Both victims sustained fatal injuries from gunfire. The medical examiner reported that the wounds were immediate and fatal, suggesting minimal time for reaction or escape. Based on lividity and body temperature, the estimated time of death for both victims was placed between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. on March 31st, approximately 3 to 5 hours before the 911 call. Darion Jenkins' DNA was recovered from the murder weapon, which was found hidden in a utility closet inside the home. No foreign fingerprints were located on the doorknobs, suggesting the killer had accessed the home, either through a key or familiarity with its security. Gunshot residue was found on clothing discovered in the washing machine, believed to have been worn by Duran earlier that day. There was no indication of forced entry, further confirming that the suspect likely had unrestricted access to the home at the time of the killings. He was arrested on March 31st, 2025, near the residence, approximately 2 blocks away. Shortly after the discovery of the crime scene, police located Duran Dante Jenkins, the 25-year-old son of Dana Jenkins, and older brother to Darren Cox. He was found walking alone through the neighborhood. According to police reports, he showed no signs of panic or resistance at the time of contact. Upon questioning, Jenkins allegedly gave inconsistent statements regarding his whereabouts earlier in the day. His hands had visible cuts and dried blood. Officers noted this and detained him on suspicion of involvement. He was transported to the Wilson County Jail for further questioning. At the time of his arrest, Duran did not confess but refused to answer key questions, instead requesting legal counsel. He was booked on 2 counts of first-degree murder pending further investigation. On April 1st, 2025, Duran Jenkins was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox, unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon due to his previous conviction and prison sentence. The charges carry potential penalties ranging from life without parole to the death penalty under North Carolina law, depending on aggravating factors determined by prosecutors. Jenkins was brought before a judge for his first appearance at the Wilson County Courthouse.
According to court documents, Jenkins was released from prison on March 25th on separate charges, just 1 week before the incident. Jenkins is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder as Wilson police investigate the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths.
The prosecution requested no bond, citing the violent nature of the crime. His recent release from prison on March 25, 2025, prior felony convictions, the familial relationship to victims, arguing that the crime demonstrated a high level of premeditation or emotional detachment. The defense provided no formal response to the charges during this initial hearing, but requested a mental health evaluation to assess Jenkins' competency to stand trial. A public defender was appointed due to Jenkins' indigent status. The judge denied bond, remanding Jenkins to custody at the Wilson County Detention Center without the possibility of release pending trial. In the days following the deaths of Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son Darren Cox, the Wilson, North Carolina community experienced a stark shift. The neighborhood, once described by residents as peaceful and routine, became a site of collective shock. Police vehicles, yellow tape, and investigators replaced the quiet familiarity of family homes. The violent deaths of mother and son, allegedly at the hands of a family member, introduced a level of fear and unease that spread beyond Snowden Drive. Residents expressed fear, confusion, and disbelief. Most were unaware of any prior conflict or indication that violence might erupt in the Jenkins household. Local neighbors reported that they had seen Duran Jenkins around the house after his release from prison, but did not expect anything out of the ordinary. Statements made to local media described Dana Jenkins as kind and private. Many could not reconcile the image of the family they knew with the reality of the crime scene investigators uncovered. Church members from Mount Moriah Community Church, where both Dana and Darren were active, spoke briefly to reporters. Dana was involved in women's ministries, and Darren served on the media production team for Sunday services. A member of the church leadership stated that they were devastated and tried to support the surviving relatives in any way possible. No official church-wide statement was released immediately, but internal prayer services and counseling sessions were held. A candlelight vigil was organized by neighbors and churchgoers 3 days after the bodies were discovered. Local law enforcement helped manage traffic as dozens of community members gathered to light candles, pray, and reflect. Darren's classmates and some of Dana's former co-workers attended. No political figures were present, and media coverage remained local and limited. Bedingfield High School responded by deploying its crisis team to provide grief counseling to students and staff. Darren Cox, a 10th grade student, was described by peers as soft-spoken, talented, and always respectful. Teachers remembered his interest in digital production and his consistent participation in media projects. The school district released a brief written statement expressing condolences to the family and offering support to those affected. It did not comment on the nature of the deaths, citing the ongoing criminal investigation. Darren's teachers organized a tribute wall in the school hallway, where students wrote memories and messages. Counselors remained available for a week after the incident, though attendance temporarily dropped as news of the murder spread. The most significant family statement came from Juanilla Cornegay, a cousin of Dana Jenkins who lived next door. She told reporters she saw Deron Jenkins on the day of the murders and described his demeanor as off. According to Cornegay, he had fresh cuts on his hands and appeared jumpy. She described him as if he had done something and was trying to conceal it. This account added weight to the timeline being pieced together by investigators. Extended family members refrained from speaking to media in detail. A few brief social media tributes circulated online, expressing shock and grief, but avoiding direct reference to the criminal allegations. No public disputes among family members were reported in the immediate aftermath. The funeral for Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox was held on April 2nd, 2025, at a local church in Wilson. It was a closed casket service due to the nature of the injuries sustained. The service was attended by local pastors, school staff, and members of the community. No members of the press were allowed inside. A separate private burial followed the service. There is no public record of previous violent incidents involving Deron Jenkins and his family. However, court records confirm his prior incarceration for gun theft and vehicle break-ins. There is no indication from public databases that Dana Jenkins had ever filed a domestic complaint or sought protective orders. Whether there were unreported incidents or internal family tension remains unknown. The weapon used in the murders was identified by authorities as a firearm. Although specific make and model details were not publicly released, the weapon was recovered at the scene. Ballistics testing was conducted to confirm that the gun matched the fatal injuries sustained by both Dana and Darren. Preliminary results confirmed this match, and the gun was sent to State Crime Lab for further analysis. Fingerprints found on the firearm were consistent with Deron Jenkins. Investigators also collected DNA samples from the scene, including blood found on Deron's clothing. A full forensic sweep of the home was conducted, with emphasis on entry points, evidence of struggle, and time of death indicators. Investigators constructed a timeline from available evidence, neighbor accounts, and digital records. Deron was released from prison on March 25, 2025, and returned to the Jenkins residence shortly after. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security system showed Deron entering and exiting the home on multiple occasions over the following days. No other individuals were seen entering the house during the relevant period. Police believe the murders occurred sometime between the late night of March 30th and the early morning of March 31st. As for motive, law enforcement has not publicly confirmed one. Theories under consideration include possible financial disputes, post-incarceration tension, or mental health deterioration. Some investigators noted Deron may have been struggling to reintegrate after prison. There is no evidence to suggest robbery or forced entry from an outside party. Toxicology reports on Deron were ordered following his arrest. While those results have not been released, investigators did question whether substance abuse may have been involved. No drugs were immediately found at the scene. A psychiatric evaluation of Deron Jenkins was requested by the court during his first appearance on April 1st. The evaluation is being conducted to assess his mental state at the time of the killings and to determine competency to stand trial. There is no prior publicly documented history of psychiatric hospitalization, but court-appointed psychologists are now reviewing his behavioral history and any warning signs that may have preceded the incident. The legal proceedings in the case of Deron Dante Jenkins, charged with the murders of his mother, Dana Jenkins, and his 15-year-old brother, Darren Cox, are expected to center around the severity of the crime, the suspect's criminal history, and his psychological state at the time of the killings. Both the prosecution and defense have signaled key strategies that may determine the case's trajectory in court. The prosecution's approach is likely to be direct, anchored in three primary arguments: Deron's prior convictions, the possibility of premeditation, and physical evidence collected at the crime scene. Prosecutors will highlight Duran's recent release from prison just 6 days before the murders. His prior convictions for firearms theft and burglary demonstrate a pattern of criminal behavior. They are expected to argue that this history indicates both a disregard for the law and a potential for escalating violence. The short time span between his release and the homicides may be used to argue that he posed a continuing threat to society. Prosecutors may pursue a first-degree murder charge based on the theory of premeditation. They are expected to examine Duran's actions leading up to the murders, his return to the family home, any potential procurement of a weapon, and any communications that suggest prior planning. The absence of forced entry may support their argument that Duran was willingly allowed in by the victims, reinforcing the claim that they were unaware of any threat. The prosecution will need to distinguish whether the killings were spontaneous or calculated. Evidence from the crime scene, such as fingerprints, DNA, ballistic reports, if a firearm was used, and the manner in which the bodies were found, will be essential to linking Duran to the crime. Blood traces, surveillance footage in the area, and phone data may form the basis of forensic testimony. Prosecutors will aim to establish Duran's sole presence at the time of death and any attempt to conceal evidence or flee. Duran's defense team faces significant hurdles, given the nature of the charges. They are expected to explore 3 main lines of defense: mental illness, the lack of clear motive, and the psychological state of Duran following his release. The defense may argue that Duran was not of sound mind during the incident. His recent incarceration, potential lack of access to mental health treatment while in prison, and sudden reintegration into society may be presented as contributing factors to a mental health crisis. If court-appointed psychiatrists confirm a diagnosis such as schizophrenia or psychosis, the defense may request a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity or reduced culpability due to diminished capacity. The defense is likely to challenge the prosecution's narrative by pointing out that there is no documented history of violent conflict between Duran and his mother or brother. Without clear evidence of motive, such as inheritance disputes, threats, or documented animosity, they may argue that the prosecution's case is built primarily on circumstantial evidence. They may further suggest that the murders were not logical or intentional, but instead the result of an undiagnosed mental breakdown. Adjustment to life outside prison can be mentally destabilizing, especially without structured support. The defense may argue that Duran's reentry plan was insufficient, and he lacked the supervision necessary to reintegrate safely. They may question whether he was provided psychiatric care during or after incarceration, and suggest that his fragile mental state contributed directly to his actions. Given the weight of the evidence and the emotional gravity of the case, the possibility of a plea deal is expected to surface. Could Duran plead guilty to avoid trial? To avoid a lengthy trial and potential death sentence, Duran's legal team may negotiate a plea agreement. In exchange for a guilty plea, prosecutors could agree to take the death penalty off the table. This would result in a sentence of life imprisonment without parole and spare the family and community from the emotional strain of a public trial. Possible sentencing outcomes. If found guilty at trial of first-degree murder, without a plea deal, Duran could face life in prison without the possibility of parole or capital punishment, depending on whether prosecutors pursue it and the jury agrees. If the court accepts a plea or diminished responsibility defense, lesser charges such as second-degree murder or manslaughter may be considered, though unlikely given the circumstances. Despite the legal processes in motion, several unresolved questions continue to hang over this case, leaving investigators and the public seeking deeper clarity. Why did Duran kill his own family? If proven, no documented motive has emerged. Did a conflict arise post-release? Was there an argument? Was Duran suffering from a psychotic episode? Without confession or credible witness testimony, the motive remains speculative. Could this have been prevented by parole monitoring? Duran was released without signs of immediate concern. Questions have been raised about the adequacy of post-release monitoring. Did he receive a mental health evaluation before release? Were there missed opportunities for intervention? Were there warning signs missed by authorities or relatives? Family members noted odd behavior in the hours before the murders. Cuts on Duran's hands, nervous energy, and silence. These signs, though vague, may be re-examined in hindsight as missed red flags. Was he acting erratic in the days prior? Did anyone witness or hear anything? The house was located in a residential neighborhood. No neighbors reported hearing gunshots or screaming. Did Duran act in the middle of the day? Was a silencer used, or were the deaths silent in nature? The silence is still unexplained. What was the final interaction between Dana, Darren, and Duran? It is unclear what was said or done in the hours leading up to crime. Was there a final dinner, a conversation, or an argument? This timeline gap remains key to understanding motive. Impact on Wilson community moving forward. The murder sent shockwaves through the small town. Many residents who knew the family were left grappling with disbelief. The notion that a mother and child could be killed by another family member days after release from prison raised concerns about public safety and reentry systems. Initiatives or changes sparked by the case. The case has reopened discussions about the supervision of recently released inmates, the availability of post-prison mental health care, screening for violent tendencies in parolees. Local advocacy groups are pushing for mandatory psychiatric evaluations upon release for individuals with prior felony records. Reflection from church and school on the lives lost. Dana and Darren were known for their involvement at Mount Moriah Community Church. Darren, in particular, was remembered by church staff and teachers as bright and respectful. The church held a candlelight vigil, and Beddingfield High School provided counseling services. Final thoughts on justice and unanswered questions. The legal process may result in a conviction, but many questions may never be fully answered. The case highlights the complexity of familial violence, the challenges of reintegration, and the gaps in social systems designed to prevent such tragedies. As the trial approaches, the Wilson community waits, not only for a verdict, but for resolution, clarity, and the hope that lessons will be learned from the darkness that unfolded inside a quiet home. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.